Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the human ship Starbound and watched the enemy fleet through the main screen. His hands gripped the rail in front of him as he counted the ships. 3 massive vessels hung in space like deadly jewels. Each one was 5 times bigger than his own ship. The enemy ships looked nothing like human vessels. They were made of some kind of crystal that caught the light from nearby stars and threw it back in rainbow colors. The ships had no visible weapons, no engines that Jake could see. They just floated there like beautiful death. "Captain, we're getting reports from the Carillion fleet," said Amy Parker from her seat at the communications station. Her voice was tight with fear. 20 ships moving to engage the enemy. Jake had met Carillions before. They were good fighters, brave and smart. Their ships were fast, and their weapons were strong. If anyone could put up a fight against these crystal ships, it would be the Carillions. "Put it on screen," Jake ordered. The view changed to show the Carillion fleet. 20 dark ships moved in perfect formation toward the 3 crystal vessels. The Carillions had been fighting wars for hundreds of years. They knew what they were. Jake expected a long battle. He expected the Carillions to use their speed and numbers to wear down the bigger enemy ships. He expected tricks and smart moves from both sides. What he saw instead made his blood run cold. The crystal ships did not move. They did not turn to face the attack. They just hung there in space like they were waiting for something boring to end. Then the Carillion ships started to explode. One by one, the attacking vessels burst into balls of fire and metal. Jake could not see any weapons firing from the crystal ships. There were no beams of light, no missiles, no visible attacks of any kind. The Carillion ships just died. In less than 4 minutes, all 20 Carillion vessels were gone. 20 ships, and their crews, wiped out like dust blown away by wind. The 3 crystal ships had not moved an inch. "My God," whispered Dr. Lisa Chen from the science station. "What kind of weapons are those?" Jake had no answer. He had seen many battles in his years as a ship captain. He had fought pirates and raiders. He had been in wars between human colonies, but he had never seen anything like this. "Captain," Amy called out, her voice shaking. "I'm picking up transmissions from the enemy ships. They're not human language, but my computer is trying to translate." "What are they saying?" Amy listened to her earpiece for a moment. Her face went white. "They're not talking about the battle, sir. They're talking about their next target, and Captain, they mention Earth." The bridge went silent except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Jake felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. Earth. Home to 12 billion humans. His wife lived there. His children. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes, sir. The computer says they call themselves Zephyrians. They're part of something called the Empire, and Earth is on their list." Jake stared at the crystal ships on his screen. These Zephyrians had just destroyed 20 warships without breaking a sweat. What would they do to Earth's small defense fleet? What would they do to the billions of people who lived there? "Captain," said Lieutenant Ben Adams from the navigation station. "Orders, sir? Do we head home to warn Earth?" Jake thought about it. The Starbound was fast, but it would take months to reach Earth. By the time they got there, would it matter? Could Earth do anything to stop ships like these? He made a decision that would change everything. "No," he said. "We follow them." "Sir?" Amy looked at him like he had lost his mind. "We follow the Zephyrian ships. At a safe distance. We watch what they do. We learn how they fight. Maybe we can find something, anything, that might help Earth." "Captain, that's very dangerous," Dr. Chen said. "If they spot us, then we die," Jake said simply. "But if we run home with just this story, Earth dies anyway. At least this way, maybe we learn something useful." The crew looked at their captain. They all knew he was right. They all knew it was probably suicide. But they also knew that 12 billion people on Earth needed every bit of help they could get. "Amy, send a message drone back to Earth," Jake ordered. "Tell them what we saw. Here, tell them the Zephyrians are coming. But don't tell them we're staying to watch. No point in making them worry about us too." "Yes, sir." Jake watched the 3 crystal ships begin to move away from the debris field that had once been the Carillion fleet. Somewhere in those beautiful, deadly vessels were the beings who planned to conquer his home world. Ben, plot a course to follow them. Stay far enough back that they won't notice us, but close enough that we can see what they do. Course plotted, Captain. Take us after them. The Starbound turned and began to follow the Zephyrian fleet into deep space. Jake did not know what they would find. He did not know if they would live through the next day. But he knew that somewhere out there was the key to saving Earth. He just had to find it before it was too late. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison first saw the Zephyrian ships destroy the Carillion fleet. 6 months of following the crystal vessels from system to system. 6 months of watching them crush every enemy they met. The Starbound stayed, far behind the Zephyrian fleet, hiding in asteroid fields and behind moons. Jake's crew had become experts at staying invisible. They watched and learned and tried not to think about what would happen if the enemy found them. Dr. Lisa Chen sat, in her lab, going over data from the latest battle. The Zephyrians had just finished taking over a mining world from the Hector Collective. Like all the other battles, it had been quick and one-sided. Captain, you need to see this. Lisa called over the ship's communication system. Jake walked into the lab where Lisa had spread out charts and data screens. The scientists looked tired. They all looked tired after months of running and hiding. What did you find? Jake asked. I've been studying how the Zephyrians fight, Lisa said. She pointed to a chart showing ship movements. Look at this. Every battle they use the same formation. 3 ships in a triangle exactly 2.7 kilometers apart. Jake studied the chart. Maybe it works well for them. That's just the start, Lisa said. She pulled up more data. Their attack pattern is always the same too. They target the biggest enemy ships first, then work down to smaller ones. They always attack in the same order. So they have a system that works. What's wrong with that? Lisa turned to face him. Captain, they're not just using the same system. They're using the exact same system, down to the smallest detail. Watch this. She played a video of 3 different battles on her screen. In each, 1. The Zephyrian ships moved in exactly the same way. Not similar. Exactly the same. Like they were following a script. I think their crystal biology makes them think differently than we do, Lisa said. They like order. They like patterns. Everything has to fit into neat little boxes. Jake thought about this. That might be useful to know, but it doesn't help us fight them. Maybe it does, Lisa said. If they always do the same thing, maybe we can predict what they'll do next. Before Jake could answer, Amy's voice came over, the ship's speaker system. Captain, to the bridge, we have a situation. Jake hurried to the bridge where Amy sat at her station with a worried look on her face. What is it? The Zephyrians just got a new target, Captain. The Vardak Confederation. Jake felt his heart sink. The Vardaks were the toughest fighters in this part of the galaxy. If anyone could stand up to the Zephyrians, it would be them. The Vardaks had been fighting wars for over 1,000 years. They were smart, mean, and they never gave up. How long until the Zephyrians reach Vardak space? Jake asked. 3 days, Captain. Jake made another hard choice. Set course for the Vardak home system. Best speed. Sir, if we get too close to the battle, Amy started to say. I know. But the Vardaks are our best hope of seeing someone actually hurt these crystal ships. If they can't do it, nobody can. The Starbound pushed its engines to the limit, racing to reach the Vardak system before the battle was over. They arrived just as the Zephyrian fleet was moving into position above the main Vardak world. Jake had never seen so many ships in one place. The Vardaks had pulled together every vessel they owned. Over 300 ships formed a defensive wall around their planet. Fast attack ships, heavy cruisers, missile boats, and fortress ships that looked like flying cities. This is it, Jake said to his crew. If anyone can stop the Zephyrians, it's this force. The battle began at dawn on the planet below. The Vardaks came at the Zephyrians from all sides, using every trick they had learned in 1,000 years of war. They used the gravity of their planet to slingshot their ships to high speeds. They fired missiles that split into hundreds of smaller warheads. They even rammed their ships into the enemy vessels when their weapons failed. It didn't matter. The Zephyrians cut through the Vardak fleet like a hot knife through butter. Their weapons reached out across impossible distances to destroy ships before the Vardaks could even get close. When Vardak vessels tried to ram them, the crystal ships just moved out of the way at the last second. In 6 hours it was over. 300 Vardak ships had been turned into scrap metal. The planet below surrendered rather than watch their entire fleet die for nothing. "Amy, did you record everything?" Jake asked. "Yes, sir. Every second of it." "Good. Send another message. Drone to Earth. Include all the battle data." Jake slumped in his captain's chair. If the Vardaks couldn't even scratch the Zephyrians, what hope did Earth have? Human ships were smaller and weaker than Vardak vessels. Human crews had less experience in war. "Captain," Amy said quietly, "I'm picking up something strange from the Zephyrian flagship." "What kind of strange?" "It's a transmission to their home fleet, but it's coded differently than their normal battle reports. My computer says it's some kind of technical data." Jake sat up straighter. "Can you break the code?" Amy worked at her station for several minutes. "I think so, Captain. It's coming through now." The translation appeared on Jake's screen, and what he read there changed everything. The message talked about something called the Strategic Wisdom Core, a computer that planned all Zephyrian battles, a machine that could predict what enemies would do with almost perfect accuracy. "That's how they do it," Jake said quietly. "They have a computer that tells them exactly what we'll do before we do it." "But Captain," Lisa said, "computers can only predict logical behavior. What if someone did something that didn't make sense?" Jake looked at his science officer. "What do you mean?" "Every species they've fought has acted logically. They've used good military tactics and smart strategies. But what if someone acted crazy? What if they did things that made no sense at all?" Jake thought about this idea. A computer that could predict logical behavior would be helpless against someone who was completely illogical. But who would be crazy enough to act randomly in a battle? Then he smiled for the first time in months. He knew exactly who would be that crazy. "Amy, prepare another message drone. This one goes to Earth Defense Command. I want to talk to Colonel Danny Rodriguez." "The Chaos Rodriguez, sir? The crazy one?" "That's exactly why we need him," Jake said. "Send the drone. Tell them we found the Zephyrians' weakness. And tell them that the craziest man in the human military might be Earth's only hope." The message from Captain Morrison arrived at Earth Defense Command on a Tuesday morning. Admiral Grace Bennett read it 3 times before she believed what it said. An alien empire was coming to conquer Earth. Ships that could destroy entire fleets in minutes. Weapons that Earth had never seen before. But the part that worried her most was Morrison's request. He wanted Colonel Danny Rodriguez to lead Earth's defense. Danny Chaos Rodriguez, the man who had ended the Martian rebellion by convincing the rebels that their water was poisoned. The man who once won a war game by having his entire army surrender on the first day, then attack while the enemy was celebrating. Admiral Bennett called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. The room filled with Earth's top military leaders. Generals, admirals, and experts in every kind of warfare sat around the long table and listened as Bennett read Morrison's report. "This is impossible," said General Frank Parker, head of the Space Marines. "No species could have weapons this powerful." "The data is right here," Bennett replied. "Morrison's crew recorded everything. 300 Vardak ships destroyed in 6 hours. The Vardaks, Frank, the toughest fighters in the galaxy." The room went quiet. Everyone knew about the Vardaks. If they couldn't fight the Zephyrians, who could? "What about this computer they mention?" asked General Kate Wilson, head of the Army. "This Strategic Wisdom Core? According to Morrison's intelligence, it predicts enemy actions with 99.7% accuracy, Bennett said. "It's how they win battles so easily. They know what we're going to do before we do it." General Parker shook his head. "Then we're dead. How do you fight an enemy who knows your every move?" That's when Colonel Danny Rodriguez spoke up from his seat at the end of the table. "You don't fight them. You confuse them." Everyone turned to look at Danny. He was a small man with dark hair and bright eyes that seemed to see everything. He had the kind of smile that made people nervous because they never knew what he was thinking. "Explain," Admiral Bennett said. "Danny," stood up and walked to the front of the room. This computer of theirs has learned to predict logical military behavior. It knows what smart people do in battle. But what if we don't act smart? What if we act crazy? That's suicide, General Parker said. Maybe, Danny replied. Or maybe it's the only way to win. Think about it. This computer has studied thousands of battles. It knows every trick in the book. But I bet it's never seen anyone throw the book away completely. Admiral Bennett studied Danny's face. She had known him for 10 years. He was strange, yes, unpredictable, definitely, but he had never lost a battle, not one. What are you suggesting, Colonel? Danny's smile got wider. I'm suggesting we fight the dumbest war in human history. I'm suggesting we do things so crazy, so random, so completely stupid that their computer breaks trying to figure out what we're doing. The room erupted in angry voices. Generals shouted about military tradition and proper tactics. They called Danny's idea insane and irresponsible. But Admiral Bennett held up her hand for quiet. Colonel Rodriguez, I'm giving you full authority to develop our defense plan. You have whatever resources you need. Admiral, you can't be serious. General Parker protested. I'm completely serious, Bennett replied. Every normal military approach has failed against these aliens. Maybe it's time to try something abnormal. Danny nodded. I'll need a special team, people who think outside the box. Anyone you want. I want Captain Julie Hayes from Psychological Operations and Major Nick Foster from Electronic Warfare, and I want complete freedom to train our forces however I see fit. Done. Danny looked around the room at the angry faces of the other officers. Don't worry, everyone. I know this sounds crazy, but crazy is exactly what we need right now. Over. The next few months, Danny put together the strangest military training program in human history. He studied every battle the Zephyrians had fought, looking for patterns in how they responded to different situations. Captain Julie Hayes helped him understand the psychology of the crystal beings. They're completely logical, she told Danny. Everything they do makes perfect sense from their point of view. They can't imagine acting without a clear purpose. Major Nick Foster worked on ways to confuse Zephyrian sensors and communications. Their technology is advanced, but it's designed to handle normal threats. If we feed it random data, it might not know how to respond. Danny's training exercises became legendary among Earth's military forces. He had soldiers practice marching, backwards. He taught pilots to fly in circles for no reason. He made ship captains practice surrendering to empty space. Sir, this makes no sense, complained Commander Steve Blake, captain of the UES Constitution. That's the point, Danny replied. If it made sense, the Zephyrians would understand it. We need to be so random that their computer can't predict what we'll do next. The hardest part was convincing Earth's leaders to go along with the plan. When President Maria Santos saw the first training videos, she called Admiral Bennett immediately. Grace, are you sure about this Rodriguez character? My advisors think he's lost his mind. Madam President, every sane approach has failed against the Zephyrians. Maybe insanity is our only option. As the months passed, Danny refined his strategy. He called it the Madness Protocol. Phase 1 involved confusing the enemy with random actions. Phase 2 would overload their computer with impossible choices. Phase 3 was still a secret that Danny kept to himself. The day finally came when Earth's long-range sensors detected the Zephyrian fleet entering the solar system. 200 crystal ships, more than enough to destroy every human vessel in space. Danny stood in the command center, watching the enemy approach on the main screen. Around him, Earth's greatest military minds waited for his orders. Are you ready for this, Colonel? Admiral Bennett asked. Danny's smile was bigger than ever. Admiral, I've been ready for this my whole life. Today, we're going to show these aliens what happens when you try to conquer the human race. He turned to face the room full of officers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to begin the craziest war in galactic history. May God help us all. Admiral Vexthari stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion and watched the human homeworld grow larger on his viewing screen. Behind him, 200 Zephyrian warships moved in perfect formation toward Earth. It would be another easy victory for the Empire. The humans had only 37 ships to defend their world. Vexthari had conquered planets with 10 times that number of defenders. This would be over quickly. "Admiral," called his tactical officer, Sub-Commander Krelthan, "the humans are moving to intercept us." "Display their formation," Vexthari ordered. The screen showed the human fleet and Vexthari paused. The human ships were not in any formation he recognized. Some were flying in circles. Others were moving backwards. One ship was spinning like a child's toy. "Krelthan, are our sensors working correctly?" "Yes, Admiral. The humans appear to be... I'm not sure what they're doing." On Earth, Colonel Danny Rodriguez watched the same display from his command center. Around him, his staff monitored communications from the human fleet. Everything was going according to plan. "Phase 1 is active," reported Captain Julie Hayes. "All ships are following Madness Protocol." Danny nodded. Above Earth's atmosphere, the UES Liberty was performing barrel rolls while firing its weapons at empty space. Captain Pete Morgan followed Danny's orders exactly, even though he thought they were insane. "Liberty to base, sir," Morgan's voice crackled over the radio. "I'm shooting at nothing and wasting ammunition. This feels really stupid." "Keep doing it, Pete," Danny replied. "Trust me on this one." Meanwhile, the UES Independence was broadcasting every comedy show in Earth's database on all military frequencies. Captain Lisa Park had loaded everything from old movies to stand-up comedy routines into her ship's communication system. The Zephyrian fleet monitored these transmissions with growing confusion. Their strategic wisdom core tried to analyze the meaning behind human jokes and cartoons. The computer's confidence rating dropped to 89% for the first time in decades. "Admiral," Krelthan said, his crystal body flickering with uncertainty, "the humans are transmitting entertainment programs. The strategic wisdom core cannot determine their tactical purpose." Vexthari studied the data streaming across his screens. In 300 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like this. "What does the core recommend?" "It is still analyzing. Confidence level has dropped to 78%. On the UES Defiance, Captain Tom Brady was following perhaps the strangest order in military history. His crew was ejecting garbage and space debris in elaborate patterns that looked like flowers and geometric shapes. "Captain, why are we making art with our trash?" asked his first officer. "Don't ask me," Brady replied. "Just keep making those pretty patterns. Command says it's important." The Zephyrian tactical analysts watched the debris patterns appear on their sensors. They spent valuable time trying to decode the hidden message behind the humans' garbage art. The Strategic Wisdom Core devoted processing power to analyzing the mathematical relationships between floating pieces of trash. But the strangest sight was the UES Constitution, flagship of Earth's defense fleet. Captain Susan Blake had followed Danny's most extreme order. Her ship was painted bright pink with yellow polka dots. It flew in figure-8 patterns while broadcasting children's nursery rhymes at full volume. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star," echoed across the Zephyrian fleet's communication channels. "How I wonder what you are." Vexthari had never been more confused in his long military career. "Krelthan, what is the meaning of this song about stellar objects?" "The strategic wisdom. Core believes it may be a coded battle plan, Admiral. It is attempting to decode the hidden tactical instructions. How long will that take?" "The Core estimates another 2.7 hours for complete analysis." Danny smiled as he listened to the reports from his ships. Phase 1 was working perfectly. The Zephyrians were so busy trying to understand human actions that they had forgotten to attack. "Julie, what's the status on their computer?" he asked. Captain Hayes checked her instruments. "Confidence level is down to 52% and falling. Their tactical processing speed has decreased by 30%. "Perfect. Begin Phase 2. Across Earth's surface, Danny's ground forces activated the second part of his plan. Construction crews began building obvious military bases in the most useless locations imaginable. They put missile silos in the middle of the Sahara Desert, where there was nothing to protect. They built radar stations on top of Mount Everest where the air was too thin for normal operation. Meanwhile, Earth's real defenses were hidden inside shopping malls, amusement parks, and fast food restaurants. Anti-ship missiles were disguised as roller coasters. Command bunkers were built underneath pizza shops. The most important military facility on Earth was hidden inside a children's playground. The Zephyrian intelligence officers tried to make sense of the human defensive strategy. Why would they put weapons where they served no purpose? Why would they leave their cities undefended while protecting empty deserts? Admiral, Krill then reported, our ground analysis shows that human defensive positions make no tactical sense. The Strategic Wisdom Corps is having difficulty understanding their strategy. What is the current confidence level? 34%, Admiral. The Corps has requested additional processing support from the home fleet. For the first time in his career, Admiral Vexthari felt uncertain. Every species the Empire had conquered had followed logical military principles. Even in defeat, their actions made sense. But these humans seemed to act without any purpose at all. Sir, his communications officer called out, the humans are sending us a message. Display it. The message appeared on the main screen. Zephyrian Fleet, please stop playing loud music during our nap time. We are trying to sleep, and your ships are very noisy. Also, do you like pizza? We have lots of pizza. Signed, Earth Defense Command. Vexthari stared at the message for several minutes. The humans were complaining about noise during a battle. They were offering food to their enemies. Krell then, how does the Strategic Wisdom Corps analyze this communication? It cannot, Admiral. The Corps' confidence level has dropped to 18%. It recommends postponing the attack until human strategy can be understood. Those words had never been spoken in the history of the Zephyrian Empire. Postpone an attack? Wait to understand. The enemy? Such concepts did not exist in their military doctrine. But as Vexthari watched human ships continue their random patterns and listened to children's songs broadcast across space, he began to wonder if his empire had finally met an enemy they could not defeat. Not because the humans were stronger or smarter, but because they made no sense at all. Colonel Danny Rodriguez knew it was time for the final phase of his plan. The Zephyrian fleet had been sitting in space for 6 hours, trying to understand human behavior. Their mighty Strategic Wisdom Corps was stuck at 12% confidence, lower than it had ever been. Julie, begin Phase 3, Danny ordered. Captain Hayes nodded and activated the most insane part of the Madness Protocol. Across Earth's surface, human military units began surrendering to empty air. Soldiers raised white flags and laid down their weapons in front of nothing. Tank crews climbed out of their vehicles and put their hands up, surrendering to trees and rocks. In space, the UES Defiance broadcast a formal surrender message to a small asteroid. Captain Brady announced that his ship was giving up the fight against the Space Rock, which had proven to be a worthy opponent. The Zephyrian monitors recorded every surrender and tried to understand what the humans were doing. Were they practicing? Was this some kind of psychological warfare? The Strategic Wisdom Corps devoted more processing power to analyzing why intelligent beings would surrender to inanimate objects. Meanwhile, other human forces held victory parades for battles that had never happened. In New York, soldiers marched down the street celebrating their great triumph over the alien invasion. In London, the Prime Minister gave a speech thanking the brave pilots who had defeated the enemy fleet. In Tokyo, crowds cheered for heroes who had saved the world. The problem was, none of these victories had actually occurred. The Zephyrians were still sitting in space, completely unharmed. But the humans celebrated anyway, broadcasting their victory parties across the galaxy for everyone to hear. Admiral, Subcommander Krell then said, his crystal body dim with confusion. The humans are claiming victory. They say they have defeated our fleet. Admiral Vexthari looked at his tactical displays. His ships were undamaged. His weapons were fully charged. His fleet was in perfect condition. But we have not been defeated. The Strategic Wisdom Corps is attempting to determine if we have been defeated in some way we do not understand. The computer's confidence level dropped to 8%. For the first time in centuries, the Zephyrian Empire's greatest weapon was admitting that it did not know what was happening. But Danny's masterstroke was yet to come. He climbed aboard a modified food delivery truck, painted bright yellow with pictures of pizza slices on the sides. The truck had been fitted with a small space drive and life support systems. It looked completely harmless. Danny, are you sure about this? Admiral Bennett asked over the radio. Trust me, Grace, this is going to work. Danny piloted his pizza truck toward the Zephyrian flagship. As he approached the massive crystal ship, he sent a simple message. Pizza delivery for the Eternal Dominion. Your order is ready. The Zephyrians had never encountered anything like this. In the middle of a battle, the enemy was trying to deliver food. The Strategic Wisdom Corps spent precious processing cycles trying to determine what tactical advantage pizza delivery might provide. Admiral, the communications officer reported, the human vessel requests permission to dock. They say they have our pizza order. Vexithari had conquered 47 star systems. He had destroyed thousands of enemy ships. He had never, in his entire military career, been offered pizza during a battle. What does the Strategic Wisdom Corps recommend? It suggests we allow the delivery in order to better understand human strategy. Against every instinct he possessed, Vexithari gave permission for the pizza truck to dock with his flagship. 20 minutes later, Danny Rodriguez walked onto the bridge of the Eternal Dominion carrying a stack of pizza boxes. The Zephyrian crew stared at the small human who had just entered their ship during a battle to deliver food. Their crystal bodies flickered with uncertainty as Danny set the boxes down on a nearby console. 1 large pepperoni, 1 supreme with extra cheese, and 3 meat lovers. Danny announced cheerfully, "That'll be $47.50 in Earth credits, or we accept most galactic currencies." Admiral Vexithari studied the human. Danny was short and looked completely harmless. He wore a red pizza delivery uniform and a baseball cap with a pizza company logo. "You are delivering food during a battle?" Vexithari asked. "Sure," Danny replied. "War makes people hungry. I figured you guys might want a snack. But we are invading your planet." "Yeah, I noticed that. Pretty impressive fleet you've got there. Mind if I ask how you make those ships invisible to radar?" For the next hour, Danny sat on the Zephyrian bridge and had the strangest conversation in galactic history. He asked Admiral Vexithari about Zephyrian culture, their technology, and their military tactics. He offered tactical advice on how to conquer Earth more efficiently. He even suggested better positions for the Zephyrian ships. The entire time, the Strategic Wisdom Corps tried to analyze what Danny was doing. Was he a spy gathering intelligence? Was he trying to sabotage their ship? Was the pizza poisoned? The computer ran millions of calculations but could not determine the human's purpose. Finally, Vexithari asked the question that had been bothering him. "Human Danny, what is your military strategy? What is Earth's plan to defeat our fleet?" Danny looked surprised. "Strategy? We don't have a strategy. You must have a plan. Your ship's movements, your communications, your defensive positions, they must serve some tactical purpose." Danny shook his head. "Nope. Everything we've been doing is completely random. No plan, no strategy, no purpose at all. We're just acting crazy to confuse you guys." The bridge went silent. Every Zephyrian officer stared at Danny in shock. Their Strategic Wisdom Corps, faced with the reality that the humans had no strategy whatsoever, finally reached a conclusion it had never reached before. Error. Insufficient data for meaningful analysis. The computer that had won thousands of battles, that had conquered nearly 50 star systems, that had never been wrong, suddenly had no idea what to do. It shut down its tactical recommendations and displayed a single message. Unknown threat level. Recommend immediate withdrawal. "But that is impossible," Admiral Vexithari said. "Intelligent beings cannot act without purpose." "Watch us," Danny replied with his biggest smile yet. 6 hours later, the Zephyrian fleet was leaving Earth's solar system. Admiral Vexithari filed a report classifying humans as tactically incomprehensible and recommending that Earth be avoided indefinitely. The Strategic Wisdom Corps was so confused by human behavior that it needed to be rebuilt from scratch. Back on Earth, Danny Rodriguez stood in the command center, watching the alien fleet retreat. Admiral Bennett approached him with a mixture of admiration and disbelief. "Danny, how did you know that would work?" "I didn't," Danny admitted. I just figured that if we acted crazy enough, sooner or later they'd decide we were too dangerous to fight. And if you were wrong? Danny shrugged. Then we'd all be dead. But at least we'd have gone down swinging. News of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy within weeks. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, conquerors of nearly 50 worlds, had been defeated by a species that threw pizza parties during battles and surrendered to asteroids. Other species began copying human tactics in their own fights against the Empire. The Zephyrians found themselves facing enemies who acted randomly and unpredictably. Their strategic wisdom core, rebuilt but still traumatized by its encounter with human logic, struggled to adapt to this new form of warfare. Years later, Danny Rodriguez became a legend. Military academies across the galaxy studied his victory over the Zephyrians. But when students asked him to explain his tactics, he always gave the same answer. Sometimes the best way to win a war is to convince your enemy that you're too crazy to fight. And somewhere in space, the Zephyrian Empire continued its conquests in other directions, giving human territory a very wide berth. They had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of fighting an enemy whose greatest weapon was their complete willingness to ignore common sense. Earth was safe, not because humanity was the strongest species in the galaxy, but because they were definitely the weirdest.